One of the big questions that's frequently asked is, can people really change? Can leaders really get better? I'd like to show you some results from one of our clients, General Mills, who went about measuring just that. After about a year post the initial development session, the company repeated the 360-degree feedback process with a group of 119 leaders. Now, some of them had chosen to work on a strength. Others chose to work on a weakness. We made that determination simply by looking at the original scores and the items that they were working on, and we could see if that score was an above average or a below average score. So 36 of them focused on developing a strength, and 83 decided to work on one or more weaknesses. Now, the improvement scores that you are seeing are based on percentile scores of the overall average of some 32 items reported by their colleagues. What did we learn? On the right-hand side of the chart is the group who focused on their weaknesses. In our original session, we encouraged people to work on a strength if they did not possess some really serious weakness. Now, about 30% of leaders do have some serious weakness, and for them, this is the optimum choice. In this case, as you can see, an additional 40% chose to do work on a weakness. Now, the good news is that they improved. They moved from the 34th percentile to the 46th percentile. On the left-hand side is the group of leaders, 36 of them, who focused on strengths. And some added a little bit of work on a weakness or two. This group also improved. They went from the 41st percentile to the 77th, a gain that you will see is 3 times as large as the other group. Oh, and one other observation we made, the data shows that the strengths group experienced a kind of a spreading effect. That is, their weaknesses improved as a byproduct of them working on their strengths. That spreading or extending effect was not observed with the group that was working on their weaknesses. What's the important message here? We have objective evidence that people can and do get better, and that those who focus on strengths make far greater strides. And as you saw from the data we presented earlier, this has a dramatic impact on business results. We now turn to an important question. How do you go about building a strength? Athletes have known for a long time about the power and benefits of cross-training. Let me pass on some additional insights from our research. We identified 16 competencies that separated average from extraordinary leaders. Obviously, there is some very interesting interaction between all these competencies. Now, it happens that I take a statin drug called Lipitor. One thing I need to be very careful about is to never drink grapefruit juice within a few hours of taking the drug. There is a very strong interaction between grapefruit juice and Lipitor. It multiplies the effect several times in your body. That same principle kind of applies to the powerful combinations of competencies. Combinations of some of these become very powerful. We observed that 2 stood out. The first is interpersonal skills, and the second is drives for results. So we did a very simple piece of analysis. We investigated the power of the combination of these 2. We looked at those people who were above the 75th percentile on interpersonal skills, but who were not at that level on drives for results. The likelihood of that person being one of the top or extraordinary leaders was 9%. Then we looked at the reverse. How about those who were at the 75th percentile on drives for results? And there are lots of you out there, obviously. But were not that high on inspires and motivates. Here, the probability of being seen as an extraordinary leader increases a bit to 13%. But now, what about someone in the upper quartile on both? You'd all assume that the likelihood of that person being an extraordinary leader would be greater than 22%, adding the two together. But are you surprised that it jumps up to 66%? Of those people who are in the top quartile on those two are now in the top 10% of all leaders in their organization. The combination of these two behaviors catapults that person to a very high level. One metaphor that sort of strikes me is that having one of them is like riding a unicycle. You can move forward, you can get somewhere, but the combination of these two becomes a bicycle with lots of stability and a lot more speed, a lot higher performance. So these two quite independent competencies interact to make this powerful combination. And that explains why we encourage you to develop competencies in different corners of the tent. And also don't stop at being really good at just one thing. This leads us now to a slightly different analysis of combinations. For every one of the 16 differentiating competencies, we discovered that there were several behaviors that had a unique relationship with it. The person who got a high score on that competency also got a high score on 5 to 12 of these other behaviors. Conversely, a person with a low score gets a low score on those same 5 to 12 behaviors. It was as if they were kind of Velcroed together. Now, you're very familiar with this idea of cross-training in athletics. A person wanting to get better at running cross-trains by bicycling, by swimming, by lifting weights, by rowing. Why is that? Because they've learned that doing those things makes them stronger, better endurance. They become a better runner. When things are highly correlated with each other, it provides a strong clue that getting better in one is quite likely to help you improve in the other. Now, yes, we know that correlation does not mean and prove causation, but it does give a strong indication that something binds them together. For example, we all know that high integrity and honesty is important. How does someone work to strengthen this competency? Not only how you change the way people perceive you, but also how you really practice it. Our research shows that one of the powerful competency companions to honesty and integrity is assertiveness. You were probably thinking, be serious. These are two completely separate qualities, assertiveness, honesty. Chances are you all know the story of the late Enron Corporation. Its fall came when a small number of senior people created offshore partnerships that were designed to hide billions of dollars of loss. Clearly not an act of high integrity. Luckily, it was only a small number of people who created that sham. But there were many people who knew about it. They were doing the accounting that tracked this all. They weren't responsible for creating it, but they were certainly aware. One woman, Sharon Watkins, had the assertiveness to write a letter identifying the seriousness of all this and calling for it to stop. What do you think? Did she possess a higher level of honesty and integrity? Does that suggest to all of us that we need to be more willing to lay our careers on the line when we see something that's not right going on inside the organization? Let's look at one other important competency, being technically competent. It has several companion behaviors that you can see. The one that is a bit counterintuitive is communicating. What is the possible connection? We think it may be simply this. Someone can be extremely knowledgeable, but if they're not willing or comfortable to speak up in meetings, then other people don't know about their high level of competence. We've created a great development guide summarizing the competency companions which you can use as you put together your personal plan of development. Just as great athletes cross-train, so we think great leaders will learn to do the same thing.